I declare the hearing open. Please invite Mr. Joseph Lai, our witness today, to come into the conference room. Good morning. First of all, I would like to welcome you all in attending the fourth hearing of the Select Committee, inquiring into the background reasons for delay of the construction of the Hong Kong section of the Express Rail Link. The witness giving evidence today is Mr. Joseph Lai, the Permanent Secretary, Transport of the Transport Housing Bureau. We have agreed to accede to Mr. Lai's request that is to be accompanied today. And they are Ms. Caroline Lee, Assistant Legal Advisor, works from the Development Bureau, and Ms. Winnie Wong, PS for TNH Transport 3. Please note that such accompanying persons may not address the Select Committee. I just want to remind the witness that the Select Committee hasn't been authorized to exercise the powers conferred by Section 9(1) of the Electrical Powers and Privileges Ordinance Cap 382. Therefore, the witness is not being protected by the privileges afforded to witnesses under Cap 382. In the course of the hearing, according to Section 18 of Cap 382, and the person who before the Select Committee intentionally gives a false answer to any question material to the subject of inquiry or presents to the Select Committee any false, untrue, fabricated or falsified document with the intent to deceive the Select Committee commits an offense. But I believe that the witness will assist the work of the Select Committee in good faith. The Select Committee has already drawn up its own practice and procedure. I just want to remind you of a few things. First of all, the privileges of members provided in Cap 382 are available only within the context of the hearings. All members, including non-Select Committee members, should refrain from making comments relating to the hearing outside of the proceedings of the Select Committee. In addition, I want to take this opportunity to remind the public and the media at the hearing that dissemination or disclosure of the evidence given at the hearing outside of the proceedings of the Select Committee is not protected under Cap 382. Therefore, if necessary, members of the public as well as the media should obtain legal advice as to their legal responsibilities. Later on in the hearing, I will invite the witness to confirm the written statement and the opening remarks submitted to the Select Committee and have them incorporated into the evidence of the Select Committee. In addition, the Select Committee may make a decision, and all the documents that have been considered by the Select Committee and have been agreed to be made public will be uploaded onto our website for public inspection. I just want to raise one point. For today's hearing, the Chinese version of the statement of the witness was only submitted to the Select Committee after the deadline. I want to seriously remind the government, in order to make sure that the Select Committee members have sufficient time to prepare, please make sure that you submit the documents to the Select Committee before the deadline. I now declare the hearing open. Mr. Lai, good morning. On the 14th of May 2015, you provided a witness statement to the Select Committee's Secretariat, which is the English version. On the 20th of May 2015, you provided the Chinese version of that witness statement. In other words, paper W7C. Do you now formally produce that witness statement to the Select Committee as evidence? Mr. Chairman, I do. May I just add a word here? After I have provided the Chinese version, I found that in a number of places there was a typo. So if you permit, I will try to inform the Secretariat about the typos. Yes, please liaise with the Secretariat directly. In order to facilitate the public as well as the media in following the proceedings of the Select Committee, I will accede to their request, if there is one, to make public your statement. Do you have anything to add to your statement on the spot? Mr. Chairman, if you permit, I would like to give a brief supplementary to my written statement. Yes, you may. Mr. Chairman, members, the Guangzhou-Shenzhen-Hong Kong Express Rail Link Hong Kong section is the first railway project launched by the government by taking the concession approach. The government has entrusted with the MTRCL about the design, construction, testing, and commissioning of the Hong Kong section of the Express Rail Link. Early 2008, the Highways Department has recruited Lloyd's Register Rail Asia Limited to review the relevant monitoring mechanism. And currently, the Highways Department's monitoring mechanism is decided upon recommendation of Lloyd's. And then basically, the role is that of the checker in terms of the monitoring and verification. The Highways Department will verify whether MTRCL has carried out the obligations under the entrustment agreement signed with the government, and will roll out the project in accordance with its project management system. In May 2012, I became the Permanent Secretary Transport for the Transport and Housing Bureau. My main duties include the following. That is to provide steer and supervision at a policy level to execute executive departments, including a number of departments like civil aviation, land transport, and logistics. And I will supervise the various departments at the policy level, including the Highways Department, and will make sure that there will be timely and effective implementation of agreed policies and programs. And I'm also the controlling officer for the expenditure head of the TB and to manage the staff resources in TB. The XRL project is one of the many tasks under the THB. When it comes to the implementation of the XRL project, according to the usual division of labor within the government, we mainly exercise the general oversight in relation to the construction and the operational arrangements. We mainly focus on monitoring the overall implementation progress, and if necessary, at the policy level, will try to coordinate the solutions of anything that may affect the progress. And for anything that may attract the attention of the public and the media, we will try to provide recommendations and advice at the policy level. We work through a number of channels to carry out the general oversight. Say, for example, our representatives in the Bureau take part in the PSC meetings chaired by the Director of Highways and held between the government and the MTRCL. And the Director regularly hold meetings that is the head of department meetings in relation to the work of the Highways Department and report progress to the Bureau. When the Bureau finds that there are things that are of concern, we'll make inquiries with the Highways Department and ask for information. And if necessary, we will ask the department and the MTRCL representatives to give briefings to us. If necessary, the director will also report to the director of the Bureau when important issues are encountered. From time to time, from the Bureau's officers and from the department's colleagues, I am aware of the latest position of the progress of the XRL project. In relation to the progress, I've been giving advice to the Bureau and the department. I've had meetings with the MTRCL and the Highways Department. As to the day-to-day professional and technological level in relation to the supervision of the progress and liaison with the MTRCL, it is mainly the responsibility of Highways Department. We are all generalists, and also as a result of the division of labor, when it comes to the monitoring, to a large extent we have to rely on the professional judgment and advice of the Highways Department and MTRCL in relation to the construction, project management, and other technical issues. I'm sure that you are especially concerned about the discussion between the government and the MTRCL before 22nd of November 2013, when we reported to the Railway Subcommittee of the LegCo concerning the XRL project, and I have already stated the details in the written statement. I just want to say briefly that on the 21st of November 2013, there was a meeting between government and the MTRCL. The government's main concern is that, first of all, commissioning in 2015 is, of course, a very important policy and planning target. We should try our best to achieve the target. But then the project is a very huge and complicated project. Even with detailed and sound planning, there may be unsurmountable difficulties causing delays which cannot be recovered, and we have to push back the target, and we have to face this squarely. Even when this indeed happens, we should inform the LegCo and the public. Secondly, at that meeting, the MTRCL time and again indicated that it was confident that there could be commissioning in 2015. Despite the various inquiries by the government's representatives, they haven't been shaken in terms of their confidence. On that day, I called a meeting because the discussion between the government and the MTRCL was on the basis of good faith. I thought that the MTRCL should have the ability and experience necessary for such a professional construction and project management item, and should be able to give appropriate advice to the government, and you should have come with preparation and in full grasp of all the actual and planned programs. In fact, the director and their colleagues, in accordance with the relevant information at the meeting, could not rule out the possibility of 2015 commissioning. At the meeting, the MTRCL also indicated that if at that stage a hasty decision to accept that 2015 commissioning target should be changed, then they would not be able to push the contractors to hurry up, and then 2015 would certainly not be the time to have commissioning. At that time, the judgment of the government was that such a view could not be regarded as unreasonable. On the 22nd of November 2015, the THB reported to the SRC of the LegCo, and this reflected the views of the Bureau, the Highways Department, and the MTRCL in relation to the progress of the construction. There was no intention to hide anything from the LegCo or the public. In fact, had the government at that time thought that there was no possibility of commissioning in 2015, we would have adopted a different approach. At the meeting of the 21st of November 2013, we indicated to MTRCL clearly that if in a few months' time it was found that the progress could not be recovered and it was not satisfactory, MTRCL must tell the government immediately and inform the public and the LegCo. Government was very concerned about the delay, and in fact in May 2014 the CE had already set up the independent expert panel, and the report was released in January this year. The report gave a review and made recommendations about the implementation of the project so as to improve the XR projects with new projects and in relation to procedures and practices.
Mr. Lai, do you formally produce the oral statement that you just read out as evidence? Yes, Chairman. And you also confirm that the contents of that evidence is true and correct? Yes, I do. I'd like to remind members that according to the practice and procedure of the Select Committee in para 15, in a public hearing, members should only seek to establish the facts relating to this inquiry when you ask questions, and you should not make statements or express your views outside of the proceedings. I will decide whether a question or evidence is relevant to or within the scope of the Select Committee's inquiry as set out in our terms of reference. I can also have the discretion to decide whether a question is a follow-up question and whether it should be allowed or otherwise. Every member, including the reply by the witness, will be 10 minutes. As for today's hearing, I'd like to ask Mr. Lai a question first. Mr. Lai, according to para 17 of the statement, you took up the position of the Permanent Secretary for Transport and Housing Transport in May 2012. Your duties include providing steer and supervision at a policy level to executive departments, including the CAD, the Highways Department, Marine Department, and the Transport Department, with a view to achieving timely and effective implementation of agreed policies and programs. I'd like you to brief the Select Committee in the past 3 years as PST. With regard to the XRL project, to what extent was your participation and what was the nature of your participation? And also, did you meet up with any difficulties in the period so that there was a hurdle for you and the THB in the execution of its duties? Thank you, Chairman, for this question. As I said in my opening statement, I gave a brief introduction. According to the Division of Labor in government, the Policy Bureau and executive departments have their own roles. After securing provision and support from LegCo in early 2010, in the ensuing years, with regard to professional and practical work, it was for the Highways Department staff to monitor the progress of XRL. However, the Bureau and the Highways Department have close liaison. The THB uses different channels to monitor the progress of the works. Mr. Lai, with regard to the monitoring mechanism and system, this is the 4th hearing and we have heard a lot about it. We know it rather well. We know how the mechanism operates. If you are talking about the general situation, I think we already know it. But my question is, after becoming the PST, with regard to the XRL, as the permanent secretary, what was the nature of your participation and to what extent did you participate? And did you meet up with any difficulties which might have stood in the way of you as PS and also the THB in its monitoring work? Yes, thank you, Chairman. I was coming to that point. My participation was on a few levels. Number one, the Highways Department regularly hosts meetings with the Secretary. Basically, it's a monthly meeting. I attended all those meetings. I also heard the reports from the Highways Department, and at the appropriate time, we also issued directions. And also, when I myself thought that I should show my personal concern and should handle the issue personally, I had called meetings. For example, in my written statement, I had already given an account that in July 2013 and also November 2013, on those two occasions, after hearing reports from colleagues, I thought that the progress, especially the progress with regard to the cross-boundary tunneling works, I thought that there was a serious problem there. So I personally called meetings to require the Highways Department and the MTRCL to give me reports. And before that, also with regard to the cross-boundary tunnel, in the latter half of 2012, I thought that the drilling works were not that ideal because there was a problem with regard to the mainland section. I gave a view to the Highways Department that he should liaise more closely with the mainland side so that the contractor could push forth its work. So my personal participation was, apart from attending meetings and listening to reports, whenever there was a need, I would give advice or input to the bureau or departmental staff, and I even called meetings myself. Did you have any difficulties in the execution of your duties? Chairman, if you would allow me to say this, Chairman, I don't think I can talk about difficulties in the vacuum. We would have to look at the entire division of labor and the structure of personnel vis-à-vis the XRL project. Members would know that under the entrustment agreement, there is division of work. The Highways Department and the government will supervise the project, and it is really about supervising or overseeing the work of the MTRCL. It's like what Lois said, we would use the checker approach. Certainly, there was this important starting point, and that is the MTRCL was involved in a lot of previous railway projects, and on the basis of their performance in previous projects, we were confident that MTRCL had the experience and it had the management system to build this railway, and also given the previous quality of work that it showed. With regard to your opening remarks, I'd like to ask a question. Para 7, you mentioned that commissioning in 2015 was an important policy and a planning objective. But then the works were mammoth and complicated, and if indeed the target would have to be pushed back, it was also a reality that we had to face. And then you used the word "we must." You said if this should happen, we must report to the LegCo and the public early. That is all right. And then in Para 8, you said that the MTRCL near the end, you said, at the meeting, stated that if at the time we would likely accept that the 2015 commissioning target would change, it would lose its leverage to press its contractors to push forth the project. And then indeed the 2015 commissioning date could not be realized. Now, wouldn't you say that the two are in conflict? Because one would say you should not announce it at the moment because the contractors would lose its steam. And then you also said that if this should happen, you should or you must report early to LegCo and the public. I think the two are in conflict. Is it that in the end you listened to the MTRCL, so you deferred the announcement because you thought that the MTRCL would lose its leverage to press its contractors, so you did not report to LegCo? Is that right? The two were in conflict, but you chose one instead of the other. No, Chairman, there was no conflict. In fact, there was no hiding at all. If you go on to read Para 9 of my opening statement, I said that had the government satisfied itself that it was impossible to have commissioning in 2015, our approach would have definitely be totally different. So from beginning to end, the stance of the THB was consistent, and that is if there was no chance to commission the railway in 2015, we must report to the LegCo and the public immediately. On the 21st of November, in that meeting, we repeatedly asked MTRCL whether it was possible for commissioning in 2015. At that meeting, they also repeatedly told us that there was an opportunity for them to do so. They required us to give them another 6 months so they could recover the delay. On that day, the main point they were making was that if in November 2013 we told you that it was possible that we could not recover the delay, in other words, it is not a must, but that it might be possible. And then the contractors would say, oh, then we did not have to hurry, because the MTRCL had already said that it might not be possible to achieve that target date and there might be another date. So if the contractors would work slowly, then it might become a self-fulfilling prophecy. So at that meeting on the 21st of November, the message we got was that there was still an opportunity for them to recover the delay, and by giving them 6 more months, the MTRCL could come back and tell us whether it was realistic. But in this respect, Mr. Lai, whether or not you could achieve the target of 2015, the technical judgment could only be made by the MTRCL. You did not have the independent ability to make that judgment. Am I correct in saying this? In other words, you did not have the independent ability to make the judgment, so you had to listen to it. Is that right? The MTRCL is the project manager. No, I'm asking you a simple question. Is it that only the MTRCL could make that judgment? Chairman, please allow me. It's going to be brief. They would have first-hand information, but when we made the decision, the Highways Department staff were there. They are a professional grade, and they said on that day that they could not totally negate that possibility of commissioning in 2015 given the information they had in hand. Okay, the Highways Department did not say that, but it was all right. Dr. Lo Wai Kwok. Thank you, Chairman. My question is a continuation of the direction of your question, because your question was also my concern. Mr. Joseph Lai, you are the PST, and I'd like to talk about your role in the XRL project. Mr. Lai, I'd like also to refer to paras 7 and 8 of your opening remark. You mentioned the meeting on the 21st of November 2013, and then in para 8 you said, I called the meeting. So it's clear that you personally called that meeting. I'd like to use this as an example to allow Mr. Lai to explain your considerations for calling that meeting. And did you do so under the directive of the Secretary or as the PST? Since there was a possibility of delay, you brought together the government and the MTRCL in a meeting to have an in-depth investigation into the progress. So was it called under the directive of the STH, or was it you yourself? And then also, between the Bureau and the department, And with regard to the supervision of the XRL project, Mr. Lai, you already gave a rather detailed discussion of that.
As the chair has already said, it has been repeated many times. We know more or less how the labor was divided. But what about your bureau? You will have the Secretary for Transport and Housing, the Undersecretary for Transport and Housing, and you are the Permanent Secretary. And then we know that there was one assisting the Deputy Secretary. So I want to know about the role of this officer. Now you have the Director of Bureau, Undersecretary, you yourself, and also your Deputy Secretary, and also someone assisting the Deputy Secretary. So please tell us about the division of duties. And if I may also ask my other question, Mr. Lai, as far as your duties are concerned, you have given us a very clear account. I think you need to provide steer and supervision at a policy level to a number of departments: Civil Aviation Department, Marine Department, Transport Department, Highways Department. So it covers a lot of areas. And then for the XRL project, I would like to know how much time you were able to set aside for this project. So a few questions for Mr. Lai. I hope you'll be given more time to answer my questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Dr. Low, for your questions. For the meeting held on the 21st of November 2013, Dr. Low, you asked me whether I called the meeting. I confirmed that I called the meeting. I recorded in my statement, in my written statement, I have given an account. In the morning of that day, the former CEO of MTRCL, Mr. Welder, telephoned our secretary. There was a conversation concerning his different views about commissioning by 2015. Succinctly, he thought that it was achievable. So on that morning, the STH directed me to hold a meeting with the MTRCL within that day to clarify the position. On the 22nd, the SRC would be having a meeting. Sorry. Do I understand it correctly? So you were sort of directed by the STH to call the meeting. Indeed, Chairman, if you allow me to explain further. Well, going back, in fact, this has been accounted for in my written statement. On the 8th of November, I took the initiative to call a meeting to understand the progress of the project. Regarding the outcome of that meeting, I found that it was quite unlikely that the project could be completed in 2015 and have commissioning in 2015. Therefore, I gave a verbal report to the STH, and then round about the 20th of November, the STH called a meeting, and the Highways Department staff briefed him, and the same conclusion was reached. In the morning of the 21st of November, Mr. Walder and the STH had a telephone conversation, but before that, the Bureau's judgment was that basically it would be very difficult to have commissioning. As a result of the teleconversation, and of course the STH had this view, and I also agreed that it was necessary to clarify the position with the MTRCL. We would like to find out about the facts and their latest judgment. For the partial opening, was it already sort of raised? Yes, already. Partial opening might have been a better sort of description. Commissioning would be a full commissioning, but then partial opening of the WK terminus. So the service will be available on day one. But then for the West Kowloon terminus, certain support facilities might not be available and completed on day one of commissioning. That's what they called partial opening. So opening is really in relation to the opening of the terminus rather than the opening of the service. Dr. Low, maybe Mr. Lai can continue. Yes, for the other questions, Mr. Chairman, regarding the division of work for the senior staff, for the SDH, of course, as the secretary, in relation to the work of the Bureau, including the work of the transport branch, he had the overall responsibility. For the undersecretary, basically, he was responsible for the so-called political work, say liaising with the political parties, liaising with the electoral members, liaising with the district council members, and then for major policy items, he has to liaise with the major stakeholders. For the XRL project and other policy issues, of course, he also took part in the discussion. He also gave advice. As the permanent secretary, as to my duties, I've already given an account. There's no need to repeat them. As to my subordinates, I've got 6 deputy secretaries or officers of an equivalent rank. One of them was responsible for all the major projects, PWP items, that is. They were mainly taken up by that deputy secretary. For the XRL project, like other railway projects, also came under this deputy secretary. So this deputy secretary as far as the policy, as well as the resource deployment and solution of policy issues, that deputy secretary was my main assistant for PWP items. Just now, I also asked this question, that is, within your own portfolio, I want to know how much time was taken up by the XRL project. Mr. Chairman, it will be very difficult to be very scientific and attach a percentage. But then, I can say that the XRL project, as far as the PWP items under us, it is an important item. As to how much time I've set aside for this project, it will be very difficult to simplify the matter and attach a percentage. Mr. Chairman, if I may have a bit more time, at the PSC, that is the Project Supervision Committee, you talked about yourself, your Deputy Secretary, as well as colleagues assisting the Deputy Secretary. I want to know about the meetings of the Project Supervision Committee. Generally speaking, who would attend? Did you attend the meetings of the PSC? How many times of such meetings have you been to? I think Dr. Low is referring to the Project Supervision Committee chaired by the Director of Highways. For the Bureau, we were represented. Usually, it would be a Principal Assistant Secretary or an Assistant Secretary. I know that over the years, in some cases, the PS and the AS would be attending. It depends on the arrangements of our work. In other words, did you attend the PSC meetings? They got monthly meetings. Mr. Chairman, for the PSC meetings, it's more technical, it's in greater details. Generally speaking, permanent secretaries do not take part. So I see you didn't take part. That's it for my question for the time being. According to paragraph 30 of Mr. Lai's written statement, it has been pointed out that up to early April 2014, MTRCL repeatedly reassured the government that the target completion date of 2015 was achievable, even though the project had encountered numerous challenges and programs would be speeded up through mitigation or delay recovery measures. So, Mr. Lai, during that period of time, March 2012 or end of May 2012, when you took up the post, up to that period of time, I would like to know whether the MTRCL repeatedly reassured the government about the target completion date of 2015, and how was the assurance given, and how many times? Mr. Lai. To follow up on Dr. Lo's question, the Highways Department and the MTRCL at the directorate level had the PSC meetings. And then in relation to the progress as well as the technical issues, they had a discussion. My understanding was that all along, whether at such meetings within the PSC or at meetings between the MTRCL and ourselves, including myself, of course, they've told us about the difficulties of the project, the challenges of the project, but at the same time, they also told us about the mitigation measures to recover the delay. And basically, as I've pointed out in the written statement, throughout about the commissioning in 2015, about the target date of 2015, they had never, it was unshaken, and then they said that the target could be maintained. Say, for example, up to November 2013, it was still their position. I think the director has already given an account at the subsequent meetings. The MTRCL still maintained that the completion date would be 2015 for commissioning. Now, as I have said, the MTRCL was said to be making assurances. Was it that the department always found that the recovery measures were feasible? I want to know when the assurance was doubted. Would you come to the view that the government had put in too much faith and confidence in the MTRCL? Mr. Chairman, well, for this question, perhaps I can try to answer from a number of perspectives. First of all, the government entrusted the MTRCL with the project as the project manager in the form of an entrustment agreement. Of course, it indicated a certain measure of confidence. I think in English it is an entrustment. So there is this element of trust.
But then, it is not that because of this, the Highways Department would totally or blindly rely on the MTRCL for information. As colleagues with professional knowledge and professional training, I believe when they assessed progress or otherwise of the project, they would look at the information from the MTRCL, and also they would have their own information. And also their M&V consultant would be providing information. I understand that Highways Department staff inspected the site every month, and they were in grasp of relevant information. So it cannot be said that the MTRCL had all the information so that the Highways Department could only rely on it. I don't think that was the case. Can I follow up, please, Chairman? So the Highways Department did not only listen to the MTRCL. My question for you is, Mr. Lai, as the Permanent Secretary, I think in your statement you said that at a certain time you started to have doubts about the 2015 commissioning date. So you had doubts about the reassurance given by the MTRCL. And did you then direct the department or other colleagues to do proactive follow-up and seek an understanding into the issue? Mr. Lai. Chairman, in the statement, I gave an account to members. In July 2013, I proactively called a meeting inviting the MTRCL to explain to me the latest progress of the project. At that meeting, I required the MTRCL to speed up the project and catch up with progress. But at the same time, if it was of the opinion that it could not commission in time, it should inform the government as early as possible. And also, when I answered the chairman's question earlier on, I reported to members that in the latter half of 2012, when we discovered that the progress of the cross-boundary tunneling works were much slower than expected, I also directed the Director of Highways to step up liaison with his business partner on the mainland to see how the mainland side and the Hong Kong side could work together so as to make the contractor expedite its work so that we could achieve better progress. The Director of Highways worked very hard in this aspect, and it had done a lot of work with the mainland side. And the result was the MTRCL and its mainland partner starting from the end of 2012 compiled a quarterly report for the Hong Kong side and also for the mainland side, so that both parties were in full knowledge of the progress of contract 826. All these years, the Highways Department was doing this, and also in the director's written statement, he explained to members in detail the delay recovery measures and what the department did to vet those measures, and so that the measures were taken at the appropriate time. Can I ask Mr. Lai a simple question? So after listening to the reports by the Highways Department, you started to have doubts in July that perhaps the commissioning date in 2015 might not be achievable. But then after listening to the Highways Department, you did not have doubts anymore. Chairman, in July 2013, as I said, in July 2013, my requirement of the MTRCL was that it had to keep up with progress, and if indeed it found that the commissioning date could not be achieved, it should report to government as early as possible. And then on the 8th of November and the 21st of November 2013, there were 2 meetings, and I had already reported to members about those 2 meetings. Now my question for you is, were you satisfied with the explanation of the MTRCL so that you did not have doubts anymore? And then in November, you started to have doubts again. Is that right? No, that's not what I meant at all, Chairman. In my mind, after the meeting in July 2013, the doubts were still in my mind. The doubts were not resolved. Chairman, can I please follow up? On the 21st of November 2013, the STH got a call from the former CEO, Mr. J. Walder of the MTRCL. There was actually a proposal that at the RSC meeting on the 22nd of November, the fact that there were delays should be announced. But then after receiving that call, the PS also said that the MTRCL also said that if they would give up at that moment, it would lose its leverage to press its contractors to push forth the project. My question for you is, PS, you would like to exert pressure on the contractors to recover delay. Did the Bureau or you yourself give this direction? And that is whether or not there could be recovery of delay, you would still face a lot of questions and problems. For example, there may be claims if you were to expedite the works. Chairman, on that day, on the 21st of November, the results of our discussion were that we would give the MTRCL another 6 months to see whether delay could be recovered. On that day, we did not talk about the fine details, but according to the entrustment agreement, if there were DRMs to be taken, and whether that would involve extra cost and how much, and whether the timetable would be affected, etc. We actually expected the MTRCL to make use of the routine mechanism, and that is to go back to the Highways Department to give an account at the PSC. And then as things developed after November 2013 in the following months, things happened at the PSC, and I understand the Director of Highways had already explained that to the committee. So please can I also ask this question, Chairman? I'd like to get this clear. Mr. PS, did you direct that follow-up action be taken? And after that, did the Director of Highways report to you? Chairman, I'd like to clarify the question, please. Mr. Chair, when you talked about direction, did you talk about directing what? Well, you said that you were satisfied with the view of the former CEO, so you did not make the announcement on the 22nd of November at the RSC meeting, and that is there would be possible delay. Chairman, I did not issue any particular direction to the Highways Department because the standing mechanism was that delay recovery measures and the financial consequences of such measures, those would be already regulated by the standing mechanism. So the follow-up work did not require any special direction from the PS. Chairman, please can I ask one last question? According to the statement of Mr. Lai in para 27, as officers in the THB are mostly generalists by training, in carrying out their work and overseeing the implementation of the XRL project, they have to, by necessity, defer to the judgment and advice of professionals in Highways Department and the MTRCL on engineering, project management, and other related technical matters. My question for you is, how many dedicated staff are there in the THB, and how many of them have experience in monitoring railway projects? And also, a second question, Mr. Lai. Those officers in THB, you say they do not have the professional knowledge or experience in monitoring railway projects. Do you think that would have an impact on effective monitoring? And do you think that arrangement is problematic? Chairman. With regard to Mr. J's question, I'd like to answer it this way. Number one, with regard to the XRL project, those who have responsibility in the project, now if you talk about the Bureau, my understanding, well, not my understanding, the fact is that none of the staff belong to the engineering grade. Either, if you talk about the secretary and the undersecretary, they are political appointees, and the rest, like myself and others, they are from the administrative officer grade. But according to the division of work between policy bureaus and departments, I don't think such a situation would particularly impact on the project, because according to division of work, the department should, and indeed it did, provide professional advice and support. So that's the division of work, Chairman. No follow-up. I'd like to follow up on this question. On the 22nd of April, 2014, at the RSC meeting, at the beginning, the STH was reported to have thought about reporting to RSC about possible delay, but after a teleconversation with Mr. Walder, he changed his mind. Before making that decision, did the STH consult you? Chairman, allow me to clarify. Chairman, you mentioned the 22nd of April. I think you must be talking about the 22nd of November. Yes, yes. The decision consulted relevant colleagues before making that decision, and it was based upon the meeting held between myself and Mr. Walder. I made a report to the STH after the meeting. Okay, my question is, so you knew about it? The STH decided not to report to the RSC the possible delay, and you knew about this? Yes. Then my question for you is, in July 2013, you said you started to have doubts and reservations. The reservations remained with you, and in November, you still had the reservations. And then in November, what did we see? First of all, the M&V consultant said that some works were delayed for 11 months. And secondly, it was clear that underneath the WK terminus, there was granite. So you only had at most 2 years to recover a delay of 11 months and also to handle a big amount of granite. Now, given the opinion from Mr. Walder to the STH, to what extent did you trust that opinion and assurance, whether you were a generalist or a professional? I think we all needed to have some common sense. Did you trust him totally with regard to his assurance that there could be commissioning in 2015?
And I think at that time, as you have mentioned, they also, towards the end of 2013, raised the idea of a partial opening. Mr. Chairman, on the 21st of November, there was a meeting. The message that I got in the capacity as a participant of the meeting, the message from the MTRCL was that 6 more months should be given to them so that they could have a look. And they were confident that it was possible to have commissioning. They didn't say that they were 100% sure that it could be commissioned, but they said that they were confident that this could be done. They also said that they hoped that 6 more months could be given so that everybody could try to catch up. I think that was what happened at the time. Mr. Wu Chi-wai. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I may go to paragraph 27, my understanding is that the THB officers are generalists rather than professionals. So your major role is to judge at the policy level whether there was overrun of cost or delay. So whether it could be delivered in time, and also the question of cost. All along, I've been listening to the replies of the Permanent Secretary. It appears to me that all the time you were just interested in the timing, that is whether it could be completed in time. Now, you thought that it was a regular monitoring mechanism, and therefore you didn't pursue this question with the Highways Department or the MTRCL. That is in order to catch up whether there would be an escalation of the project cost. Can I confirm this point with you? That is, you didn't ask them about that. Mr. Lai. Mr. Chairman, if I may make 2 points in relation to Mr. Wu's question. First of all, as far as I can remember, up to November 2013, of course, the information that we gathered was that the project could be delivered in time and within budget, without cost overrun. And then the second point was that any delay recovery measures would of course have a bearing on the financial arrangements, and it could be substantial or minor. And the project has been implemented for a number of years, and quite a lot of delay recovery measures have been implemented. For the DRMs, how they were carried out and what expected outcome there would be, as well as the extra cost to be incurred, there was a clear procedure that the Department of Highways and the MTRCL were familiar with, and they discussed on that basis. So in the aftermath of the 21st November 2013 meeting, the MTRCL told us that we should give them 6 months for them to catch up the progress. As the Permanent Secretary, my expectation was that the MTRCL, being our project manager, and the Department of Highways, being the executive department, should follow the established mechanism to discuss what measures they would be, and secondly, should there be extra financial implications, what they were. On that day, we didn't have a discussion at that level. That's a fact. Can I confirm, Mr. Chairman, is the PS saying that all along he didn't doubt that the DRMs would cause a cost overrun, or was there any sign to send you a signal that there would be cost overruns? So my question is, have you ever doubted at all? It's as simple as that. Mr. Chairman, I didn't say that and I didn't imply that. Just now, what I was saying was that, according to my memory, up to November 2013, the message that we got from the MTRCL, what I meant was that before that meeting, the project was in time and within budget. You mean the MTRCL, not the KCRCL? Yes, MTRCL. Now, Mr. Chairman, now such a large project. Now, the MMV has said that there's been slippage up to 8 months or 11 months. At that time, you were aware of that, right? If that is positive, according to your common sense, I did not say your professional advice. According to your common sense, for such a huge slippage and such massive DRMs, would you say that there would be no cost implications? In 2 years' time, you have to catch up with slippage of so many months. Mr. Chairman, I hope I didn't give you the impression that I thought that the DRMs after November 2013 would certainly not cause a cost overrun. I hope I didn't give you that impression. Just now I was saying that at the meeting held on the 21st, we didn't go down to such a level. Of course, the focus of the discussion was whether it was possible to commission the service in 2015 as scheduled. For the follow-up work, it should be left to the MTRCL as well as the department. The two should see, in the case of delay recovery, the MTRCL should propose specific measures and how much they should cost. Be it the discussion within this select committee or discussion by other panels of the LegCo, I think it didn't occur, it didn't happen, because by the middle of April 2014, the MTRCL had not up to that time given a comprehensive plan to the Highways Department. Well, Chairman, for the information given to the Select Committee, we were told that we had already got cases of claims up to tens of billions of dollars, $10 billion. P.S. Now you have this project with $10 billion worth of claims. Have you ever analyzed the relationship, if there was, with the DRMs? Did you direct the Highways Department to understand the matter so that you could have a better understanding? Mr. Chairman, the information I got at the time, well, of course, we are now talking about different moments. If we are talking about the period up to early November 2013, this is because towards the end of November 2013, a lot happened. But then if we are talking about the time up to early November 2013, the information at the time that I got was that the project could be completed within the approved budget. Of course, we knew that there were applications for claims. The MTRCL and the Highways Department already had a clear mechanism to use a very professional approach to handle the claims. Of course, I must trust the MTRCL and the Highways Department that they would exercise the professionalism to handle the claims. But as I have said, up to early November 2013, I didn't get any message that there would be cost overrun. Mr. Chairman, can I confirm? Permanent Secretary, you have been dealing with so many public works projects. It is a project worth $60 billion, and yet we have got $10 billion worth of claims already proposed, and then you still have a lot to go. According to common sense, would you still say that there was no need to follow them up to find out about the substance and the purpose as well as the causes of the claims? Would you say that it is outside your responsibilities? Mr. Chairman, within the Bureau, of course, I was very concerned about the project, whether it could be completed in time and whether it could be completed within the approved budget. As I have said a moment ago, all along the message that we received was that, of course, there were applications for claims. But then we had a sound system. Mr. Chairman, all along I was trying to find out whether the PS had the responsibility to find out about the cause and whether you have given directives to find out about the cause, because we're talking about 1/5 of the value when it comes to the claims. Do you have the duty to do so, and is it part of your duties? Of course, as the Permanent Secretary, I have the responsibility to make sure and try my best to make sure that there would not be cost overrun. When there is a cost overrun, we should be made aware of it well in advance or at an early stage. Now, the project was completed just up to half of it, and yet the claims would amount to 1/5 of the budget. Would you say that as far as your portfolio is concerned, you need to regard it as a warning signal? Mr. Chairman, for the claims, well, we still have many cases of claims which are ongoing. Yes, we understand. I just want to know about your responsibility. Do you think that you have the duty to find out about the nature of the claims, the causes of the claims, and and what's the relationship between the claims and the project, Mr. Chairman? Many claims are still ongoing, so please excuse me from giving a detailed answer. For the claims, for the value of the claims, that's part of it. We have gone through the established mechanism, and we will rely on the established mechanism to decide on the amount of claim to be paid. In many works projects, the percentage isn't as high as that. I have to be careful here. I'm just saying that I'm making general points. I'm not talking about the claims that are ongoing. As far as my memory is concerned as to the number of claims and how much has been paid, I think the progress reports that we have given to the RSC, I think they have all been accounted for. So I just want to let everybody know, and we want to let the government know what we are talking about. Of course, as the Permanent Secretary and for our Bureau staff, there are two duties. First of all, of course, we try to avoid cost overrun. And if we spot that it is likely to have cost overrun, then we should deal with the matter as soon as possible, and we should come back to give an account to the electrical ASAP. By early November 2013, we didn't see any signals telling us that there could be a cost overrun. Permanent Secretary, please tell us the following for the sake of the record. In paragraph 27, when the THB identified issues of concern, then you would ask the MTRCL. So please provide information in a table form. Regarding the progress of the project, I want to know how many issues have been raised by the THB regarding areas of concern. And please also tell us about the replies.
Can you supply a table? I will do my best, Chairman. I will supply all the information that we have to Mr. Wu. Yes, please give it to the Secretary after the meeting. Chairman, can I please follow up? Sorry, maybe I have taken up too much time. Chairman, I'd like to seek an understanding into this. On the 22nd of August, Mr. Yao Shengwu, the Undersecretary, attended a Board of Directors meeting of the MTRCL. Before that, PS, did you remind the Undersecretary about the possibilities of delay of the XRL project so that the Undersecretary should raise such queries with the Board of Directors? I'd like to know whether you discharge your responsibility, or was that your responsibility that when the Undersecretary attended meetings of the MTRCL board, you should provide the information to him beforehand? Mr. Chairman, if my memory serves me right, I personally did not, but generally speaking, if the STH or the USTH attends MTRCL board meetings, before they do so, our colleagues should make the appropriate preparations. Today, I cannot remember what they prepared. Can I please clarify, Chairman? P.S. You said that with regard to delays of the project, you said you had doubts, you had worries. Apart from you, who else in the Bureau knew about this? If you did not do it, who would remind Mr. Yao when they prepared papers for the MTRCL board meetings so that Mr. Yao could raise queries with the board? So who made the preparation for Mr. Yao to attend these meetings? Please give me a moment, Chairman. Chairman, just now I said whether it be the STH or the USTH, before they attend MTRCL board meetings, colleagues should prepare papers for them. Mr. Wu, you mentioned the meeting of August 2013. Now, how colleagues actually made preparation for the USTH for that meeting, I don't have the information at hand. Chairman, my question was, apart from the PS that you yourself had the doubts, I'd like to ask whether there were other officers in the Bureau who shared your view. Were there other colleagues in the Bureau who had the same worries? Sorry, Chairman, it would be difficult for me to say on colleagues' behalf whether they had doubts, but the objective fact is, at the meeting in July 2013, my direction to the MTRCL was known to colleagues in the Bureau. Chairman, can I ask for the attendance list of the meeting in July? And on the 22nd of August, the USTH had a meeting with the MTRCL. I'd like to have the papers that were prepared for that meeting. I'm sure you must have prepared some papers for the USTH. I'd like to have that set of papers for follow-up. Mr. Lai, certainly, we'll go back and look into these two matters. the clerk will follow up with you. Now we have a black rainstorm warning. According to Rules of Procedure 28, I have to decide whether we should continue with or end this meeting. I like to say we should continue because, first of all, we wouldn't like to trouble Mr. Lai to come a second time. And secondly, we are stuck here. So shall we? Shall we continue? Next, Mr. Gary Fan. Thank you, Chairman. I have 5 questions. I will try to ask each in 2 minutes. P.S. Mr. Lai, I like to refer to paras 51 to 54 of your statement. You received the direction of the STH as to whether you should report to delays of XRL at the RSC meeting, and you immediately had a meeting with the MTRCL. In para 54, you wrote very clearly that you convened the meeting on the basis that discussion between the government and the MTRCL will be conducted in good faith. I am aware that you have put the words within parentheses. You did not repeat it in English in the Chinese text. I'd like to ask you why you put the Chinese words good faith within parentheses. Are you being ironic when you quoted this term? Is it that the MTRCL did not attend the meeting in good faith, that it was hiding information from the government, so that you interpreted the words good faith in the Chinese text as you did? No, actually, I did not intend that interpretation. I put the term within parentheses because when I wrote it, I drafted it in English. I used the English words good faith. Readers of English would understand immediately what good faith means. And in Chinese, I thought that my rendition was a direct translation of the English. And as I was saying at the beginning, Mr. Chairman, I wanted to correct 2 or 3 typos in the Chinese text, and this is one of the places. Indeed, I would like to put in the English term also in the Chinese text, so it was not meant to be an ironic use. My second question is para 54. Now, Mr. Lai, you also said that you expected the MTRCL to fully understand the consequences of not informing the public in good time if it knew it could not achieve the commissioning date. I'd like to ask Mr. Lai, is it that the THB decided that at the RSC on 22nd of November, the THB would not be announcing the possible delay? Is it that your expectation was based also on that direction? And also, do you think that the MTRCL did not meet your expectation as stated in 54, and that is the consequences of not informing the public in good time if it knew it could not achieve the commissioning date? Chairman, on the 21st of November, together with Mr. J. Walder and his colleagues in the MTRCL, we had this meeting. And one of the basic assumptions was that we all had to do our best, but we also had to understand that if we knew we could not complete it in 2015, and if we did not announce it to the public as early as possible, we should all know the consequence of that, because the MTRCL would handle many projects which are very much related to people's livelihood, and it has a long experience of working with the Legislative Council. So the MTRCL should know that it was important for them to be honest and frank. In other words, if indeed it could not complete it in 2015, it should give an account to the public. And in fact, in the meeting of the 21st of November, we repeatedly reminded the MTRCL the discussion was based on this very important assumption or basis. But as I reported to you and as I said in my statement, the MTRCL said on that day that they still thought that they could do it. And they asked us to give them another 6 months to recover the delay. This was after our repeated reminders. And that was the very clear and unshaken message. So is it that, I don't know what is my interpretation, so the MTRCL did not meet your expectation? Now I'd like to refer to para 37 of the statement. This is my third question. In March 2013, the Highways Department received the first progress report from NTRCL and owner of the mainland section of the XRL on the progress. According to the report, the two TBMs driving towards the Shenzhen-Hong Kong border were experiencing a delay of about 10-11 months. And 2 months later, one media report reported the delay. Why is it that the Highways Department did not release the report saying that there was a delay of about 10 to 11 months? The media report said that there would be an overrun of 1 year, and it was about the WKT, not the continuing concern of the THB, and that is about the cross-boundary tunnel works. I'd like to ask the PS, after the media report in May, was it for the first time then that you knew that there was also a delay at the WKT? And according to the May 8th, 2013 information from the MTRCL, the WKT works, how many months of delay was it experiencing at that time? Mr. Lai. Chairman, the problems at WKT were such that the government, the THB, and also the department had always known that there were these problems. But did you get to know for the first time in May 2013? You said you had always known. So when was the first time that you knew about it? Chairman, if you talk about the entire Bureau and when it came to know this, I think colleagues on the working level, since they have more contact with the Highways Department, they knew. But the thing is, Chairman and members, this is not to say that the works were delayed. The main consideration for us and for the Highways Department subject team was whether it could be recovered. The thing is, if you did not do anything, if you just allowed things to go on using the same manpower contingent, no, Mr. PS, I asked you a very specific question, and I would also beseech you to answer me directly. You said you knew and you were concerned about the cross-boundary tunneling works, and then in May 2013, the fact about delay at WKT surfaced, and that is why I'm asking you the question. And also why in May 2013 you did not announce the delay of the cross-boundary tunneling works by 10 to 11 months. I asked a very specific question, Chairman. Maybe you can answer the questions one by one. Mr. Lai, when did you first get to know the delay at WKT? When did you first know that there was also a delay at WKT? Chairman, actually, on the level of the Bureau, Mr. Gary Fan, you mentioned May 2013 and the media report. Actually, we knew it before that media report. But then the message we always got was that there was delay, but then it could be recovered. By May 2013, there was this newspaper report. We again sought an understanding into the issue, and there was a delay, all right, but then different DRM could be taken to catch up with the delay. I think he is repeating himself. I heard him say that it was in May that he first got to know it.
The first time you knew it was May. Mr. Chairman, I said that prior to 2013, at the working level, the Bureau was aware that it wasn't smooth and there was slippage. WKT, West Kowloon, Mr. Gary Fan talked about the West Kowloon before 2013, yes, and there were DRMs to catch up. Why didn't you give a direct answer? In May 2013, why didn't you talk about the cross-boundary tunneling works? There was already a delay of 10 to 11 months. Mr. Chairman, allow me to answer in two parts. On that day, at that time, the judgment was that, or rather, I put it this way, the message given was that it was possible to catch up. For the Legislative Council, in particular, the Railway Subcommittee, as to how we were to give a better and more detailed account. Of course, everybody knows that we have already learned a lesson. For the papers that we submit to the RSC, it is more frequent. Instead of every 6 months, it is now every 3 months. And then for the information given, it is more detailed, hoping that whenever we identify an issue which in our eyes or in the eyes of the MTRCL can be recovered by the DRM, we still have to be stated as early as possible. So this is one of the lessons that we have learned. Let's have a short break, around about 15 minutes, so we'll come back in 15 minutes time. I just want to read out the names of the members who will be asking questions. Mr. Frankie Yik, Mr. Chen Kam Lam, and Ms. Claudia Mo. All right, we'll come back slightly after 11. If there is time, we will have a second round.